Hey guys, welcome back to Sacred Vedic Astrology. My name is Samantha and I'm so blessed, so grateful, and truly so lucky to be a professional Vedic sidereal astrologer. So I am so excited for the chart analysis that we're going to get into today. I'm like hyped up. I'm so excited. Let's go. This is going to be a really powerful lesson in Vedic astrology. All right, so we're going to go into the charts of Barbara Hutton, who was one of the wealthiest women from back in the day, who was famously titled Poor Little Rich Girl. The reason she got that name is because she inherited all this wealth. So she acquired all this wealth through inheritance, and she became one of the richest women at the time after her mother's death. All right, so even though she acquired all this money, all this eighth house energy, which yes, we're going to do a deep analysis into to understand both the pros and the cons of the eighth house and Vedic astrology. It's really, really powerful in this chart. Even though she acquired all the wealth and the riches from the eighth house, which is other people's money and inheritance, she also lived a really tragic, up and down, tumultuous life as well too. All right, so she acquired all the wealth, she got all the money, right? And then she had this life that was pretty depressing at certain points. She struggled with addiction. She had, I believe, 7 marriages that did not work out. She lost her mother at the age of 5, and she didn't seem to have any sort of parental figures that looked out for her. Okay, and also one of her greatest losses was the death of her only son as well too. So, this is a very eighth house sort of thematic life that we are getting here, right? The eighth house rules other people's money. The eighth house rules inheritance, quite literally. The eighth house rules ups and downs and highs and lows. The eighth house also rules, this psychological intensity, and a lot of times really intense psychological issues can come about when the eighth house has malefics there as well too. All right, so she was called Poor Little Rich Girl because she had all this money, all the money in the world, right? But as the tale goes, the tale as old as time, money can never actually buy us that true happiness, right? So she had so much wealth but lived a really tragic life. So this is the story of the eighth house, essentially. Right? This is the most eighth house story I've ever seen in my entire life. All right, she had the money, she had the inheritance, and then she had all these ups and downs and addictions and divorce and endings and, emotional issues as well too. So the eighth house can really be that mixed sort of energy astrologically. All right, so we're going to go into her Vedic astrological chart to see what caused all this energy in astrology. It's one of those charts that gives me this feeling of just like goosebumps all over my body where I'm like, you're joking. Like, you have to be joking because it's too accurate. It's almost too accurate. All right, so I thought this would be a really great chart analysis to get into to understand, wealth through inheritance, because yes, we can see that astrologically it's a very specific placement in astrology. Second house lord in the eighth house, we'll get into it. All right, but we're also going to get into the highs and the lows that the eighth house can cause. It's the good, it's the bad, it's very mixed. All right, eighth house is also, transformation and constant change and death and loss. It's also the house of the occult and metaphysics. And I was surprised by that because I was looking at her chart and I was like, oh, she had to have also been, a mystic of sorts as well too, because she has so much energy in her eighth house. Then I do research. Turns out she loved all things mystical. So this is going to be a really powerful chart analysis that's going to show us her whole entire life story through the lens of Vedic astrology. It's really, really powerful. You guys are going to learn a lot through this chart analysis. And, you know, you can see when someone is going to have that more tumultuous life if they do have a lot of 8th house energy, especially if the 8th house is with malefics, if it's, you know, not well placed. It will absolutely happen as well, too. All right, so I'm going to let my Gemini rising not talk forever. And I'm going to pull up Barbara Hutton's Vedic astrological chart. We have AA level accuracy, which means we can go into the Vargas. We can go into the D9 of Vamsha and get confirmation through the other charts as well, too. So it's really powerful. Right, so here we have Barbara Hutton's Vedic astrological chart, baby. Let's get into it. All right, so Barbara is a Pisces, Lagna, or Ascendant. So we get Rahu right there on the Ascendant. So it means that the nodes are in the 1st, 7th axis. All right, Rahu on the Ascendant will give someone an ability to be seen or be in the public in some regard. What's interesting about Rahu in the 1st house, you'll find a lot of those with Rahu on the Ascendant because it expands. There's this ability for them to be seen wherever they go. People can be drawn to their energy. So it can be this sort of, you know, fame-producing aspect when we get either Rahu or Ketu in the 1st house, because the 1st house is our ascendant, how we come across, the ability to be seen. And then Ketu is in the 7th, which is giving this karmic access point between the person themselves and the public. Right? So a lot of times with that Rahu Ketu access in the 1st house, 7th house access gives this sort of quote unquote karma between that person and the public. So you'll see either Rahu or Ketu in a lot of charts of those who are celebrities. All right. Now, Rahu on the Ascendant can show that her energy, her personality is very Rahu-like, all right? She has the ability to be seen. She loves nice materialistic things, right? Rahu on the Ascendant will give someone this very eccentric way of dressing. They love luxuries. It's the energy of Rahu, right? So it's the materialistic plane of existence, and it's right there on her Ascendant, all right? So best believe that she dressed in expensive clothes. She had, you know, nice items, jewelry, luxuries. That's Rahu right there on the Ascendant. All right. Now, Ketu in the 7th house, she had 6 failed marriages. All right. Ketu is an energy of disconnection. Ketu can cause a lot of issues when it goes into the 7th house. I've seen it many, many times. So that means that, you know, Rahu in the 1st, she's here to develop herself and go towards herself in this lifetime, which can come across at times like self-seeking or self-focused if someone isn't careful with Rahu on the Ascendant. All right. And then Ketu in the 7th shows that there can be losses around marriage. There can be disconnection of marriage, right? Ketu is the loss, it's the detachment, it's the karmic energy in the chart, and it's in the 7th house of marriage, right? That would be 6 marriages. You know, there's other reasons why this is happening astrologically, but we see that this whole axis point is with the 1st house of the self. Ketu's in the 7th. What's very interesting as well, too, I've said this before, but Ketu is film, photography, and television, and she was famously married for a brief period of time to Cary Grant, who was on film, photography, and television. All right. So Ketu, which rules film, photography, television, is in her 7th house of marriage. She married someone who was on film, photography, and television, but also Ketu is the void, it's the disconnection, it's the detachment. So she eventually has to let go of, you know, certain relationships in marriage with Ketu in the 7th. All right. So Rahu in the 1st, an ability to be seen, an ability to be in the public eye, right? That would be a socialite. She was like a socialite back in the day, kind of like what we would see as like a, you know, Paris Hilton or Kim Kardashian today. That's Rahu on the Ascendant. It gives a lot of power and a lot of influence around, you know, that person. But then Ketu's in the 7th, so they can have issues in marriage and relationships where they can be, kind of pulled more towards themselves in this lifetime with that Rahu 1st house, Ketu 7th house axis. Right? Just really depends how someone works with that energy, if they're going to be more self-focused or if they're going to find that balance between the Rahu Ketu axis. All right. Rahu in the 1st, we also get Jupiter's influence, right? Jupiter is in the 9th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we get Jupiter onto the ascendant aspecting Rahu. So Jupiter is expansion, growth. Rahu is larger than life. So now we get a Jupiterian influence onto the 1st house, which is like expanding the self, right? The ability for her to be seen. It's kind of this influential aspect when we get Jupiter conjunct Rahu on the 1st house. All right, again, she was a socialite. Her whole career was around herself. That's Rahu on the ascendant, aspected by Jupiter, best believe it. All right, so now her 1st house lord is Jupiter in the 9th house, conjunct Mercury in the Jyesta nakshatra. This is very interesting because the 1st house lord is in the 9th house. Okay, her whole chart is ruled by the 9th house. She acquired this massive fortune from her father. 9th house is the karaka, or, the house that indicates the father. Jupiter is there, Mercury is there. It's expanding, right? 9th house, there's expansion, there's wealth from the father. 2 benefics in the 9th, but it's in the sign of Scorpio, it's in the Jyesta nakshatra. So the father was actually very Jupiterian in the sense that he had all this money, he had Jupiter with Mercury, he had a very successful business. Mercury is a karaka for business. However, it says that he was like off, living his life and wasn't really focused on Barbara. So he was pretty distant, pretty disconnected, kind of Jupiterian, right? He was off, overindulging and living his life, right? It's Jupiter, Mercury expanding his business. 9th house, luck and fortune as well too. So he had this really fruitful business, but he wasn't there. Okay. And it's in the sign of Scorpio. And you'll find that planets don't do well in Scorpio, right? Because Scorpio is this very, intense energy. It's getting to the depths. It's all this intensity. It's ups and downs. So we see that Jupiter and Mercury conjunct very tightly in the 9th house, which gives an ability for her to travel. She was always traveling a bunch. That's Jupiter in the 9th house, best believe it. Gives us the ability for her to be interested in like charity and organization and giving back. That's Jupiter conjunct Mercury in the 9th house. She did all of those things. She was also very interested in spirituality. All right. However, there was also a sense of, her feeling very scorpionic in her life as well too. So that's a lot of that Scorpio energy. It's expanding the Scorpio themes as well, which is intensity, ups and downs, death, endings, loss. All right. And that's also in the Jyesta nakshatra, which you'll find Jyesta is a very wealth-producing nakshatra. All right. There's certain portions of the nakshatras that just happen to produce wealth more than other portions of the nakshatras. And Jyesta is a very, very powerful wealth-producing nakshatra. You'll see it in many billionaire, millionaires' charts. It's very powerful. So the father, Jupiter in the 9th, was very powerful. Jupiter with Mercury had a powerful business. 9th house of father. 1st house lord in the 9th house. Her whole life was ruled by that inheritance and that wealth that came from the father. All right. So that's very interesting, isn't it? And then we also get that Jupiter in the 9th giving expansion onto the 1st. So Jupiter in the 9th, the father's energy is now connected as well to the 1st house, expansion of wealth through the father. And she, again, loved to travel. Jupiter in the 9th will give a love for travel, best believe it. All right, so that's already a huge part of her life. But now this is where things get eerie. This is where things get very eerie. All right, so 9th house is Scorpio. Okay, so the dispositor of the 9th is going to be where Mars goes. Okay, so remember, 9th house is the father, 9th house is blessings, 9th house is luck, 9th house is fortune. So it can show us where our luck and fortune can come from in this lifetime, but also it's really that indication of the father. So 9th house, let's hop over to Mars. What house is the 9th lord in? It's in the 8th house. Guys, what is the 8th house rule? Inheritance, other people's money. The father gave her a huge inheritance, 9th lord in the 8th house. It's really, really powerful. It's really powerful. Okay, so the inheritance came from the father, 9th lord in the 8th. Now, this 8th house, although it is powerful in the sense that we have Sun conjunct Mars, this is also very afflicted as well too, because we have Sun in Libra, which is opposite of its own sign of Aries, so it's in detriment in Libra. The Sun doesn't like to be in Libra. Mars also does best in Aries or Scorpio. We're going by the old rulership in Vedic astrology. So now we have a weak Sun conjunct a weak Mars in the 8th house of Libra. All right, so I've talked to this with you guys. Mercury's about to retrograde. If you want to be an astrologer, you have to hold multiple viewpoints and know that two things can be true at once, okay? So, Sun in detriment in Libra, conjunct Mars opposite of the sign it wants to be in. This is, going to cause issues for the 8th house, okay? 2 malefics in the 8th house. It's a lot of energy. Sun with Mars, puts a lot of energy towards it, but it's also going to cause a lot of issues as well too. So Sun conjunct Mars opposite the signs that both of these planets want to be in Vishaka in the 8th house, energizes the inheritance, energizes the money that she gains from the father, 9th lord in the 8th house. But then we get this really malefic influence as well too, because the Sun is not happy in Libra, Mars is not happy in Libra, 2 malefics in the 8th. Okay, so now we're getting also issues with the inheritance, and we're also getting issues with the psychological energy, and it's causing this sort of agitation, Sun, Mars in the 8th house. All right, so do you see how both things were true? Both were true. She got this huge inheritance. 8th house is very activated from the father, 9th lord in the 8th. We'll also talk about the 2nd house in a moment, because yes, the 2nd does disposit into the 8th, okay? But then it's also true that this really, really difficult Sun-Mars conjunction in the 8th house is also going to cause psychological issues, ups and downs in the lifetime. All right, quote unquote, poor little rich girl, right? That's what she was called. That's quite literally Sun in detriment, conjunct Mars, out of the sign it wants to be in the 8th house of ups and downs, psychological transformation, and the 8th house is a very intense house, all right? The 8th house is not a house that is light. It's not a house that is, oh, we're having fun in the 8th house. We're going to the depths of things in the 8th house, all right? So she had to deal with death at a very young age, right? Her mother died when she was very young, Sun, Mars in the 8th, dealing with themes of death. She dealt with themes of inheritance, that's the 8th house of other people's money. She dealt with addictions, because now we're getting 2 malefics onto the 2nd house. 2nd house, malefic influence is, it's a famous Vedic principle that malefics onto the 2nd gives addiction. All right, this is in the ancient scriptures. And yes, it works many times in Vedic astrological charts. So now we're also getting addiction issues, right? Which she did have with that Sun-Mars aspect onto the 2nd. So do you see how it's mixed energy? It's not one, it's not the other, it's both, and they're both true. And the other aspect of this that is really, really powerful, guys, like really powerful, is the 2nd lord. So 2nd house is Aries. 2nd house is how we make our own money, right? So 2nd house is I'm acquiring money from this source or this source. Now, because the 2nd house is Aries, the 2nd house lord goes into the 8th, okay? So how does she make her money? Through the 8th house of other people's money and inheritance, quite literally. And the Sun is a karaka for the father. So not only do we get 9th lord in the 8th, which is inheritance from the father, Jupiter conjunct Mercury from his business. Now we also get Sun, karaka for the father, in the 8th house of inheritance from the father. And now a third thing we're getting is the 2nd house lord in the 8th house, money that she gains herself from inheritance from the father, karaka for the father in the 8th house. There's kind of this rule in Vedic astrology that many Vedic astrologers follow, that I know of where if you see something like 2 to 3 times, you can put money down and you can bet on it, right? So that's like a Vedic sort of, like, it's kind of funny, but it's also real, where if you see something in a chart showing up multiple times, you can bet money that that is going to unfold in someone's life. So we get second lord in the 8th, sun kark of the father in the 8th of inheritance, conjunct Mars, you know, expanding that energy, motivating that energy. Ninth lord in the 8th house. Jupiter in the 9th, you know, luck, blessings, fortune from the father, 2 benefics in the 9th house. All right, but then 9th house lord in the 8th house, there was also issues with the father. He was gone, he was distant, he wasn't there, right? So 9th lord in the 8th house is also loss around the father. And then we get 2 malefics in the 9th lord house, right? Sun's the karaka for the father. So yes, there's inheritance from the father, best believe it. But also there's issues with the father because the 9th lord is really, really full of this, like, ooh, it's intense energy. Sun opposite its sign of Libra, conjunct Mars, 2 malefics in a 3-degree orb of conjunction. Like, it gives me like this feeling. Sometimes when I'm like reading charts, I feel the energy of the chart. And as I'm seeing this, I'm like, whew, this is intense. All right. And then we get that second lord in the 8th house. Really, really, you know, intense energy. So that's where we see the inheritance. That's where we see that she's gaining money from inheritance from the father. Sun's the karaka for the father. 9th house is the house of the father. Okay. All right. Now, this is really interesting because she has Saturn retrograde in the 3rd house, also onto the 9th house. Then we also get some Saturn energy. The father's distant. He's gone. He's not there emotionally, which is, you know, how he was. Saturn restricts siblings, right? It's in the 3rd house of siblings. Barbara Hutton didn't have any siblings. She was an only child. So we get Saturn restricting siblings in the 3rd house. And it's retrograde, which can actually make that energy stronger. I have another client who has Saturn retrograde in the 3rd, and she has all sorts of issues with her siblings. Okay, so sometimes when a malefic is retrograde, or a planet is retrograde, it can make that planetary energy stronger. Okay, it's not weaker, it's actually stronger when a planet is retrograde because it's closer to the Earth at the time of birth. Okay, so retrograde planets are very powerful in Vedic astrology. We see it differently than Western astrology. So a retrograde planet is something that is strong, it's powerful, but it's also unconventional, and it's also something that can develop as someone gets older as well too. So we see a strong Saturn in the 3rd house denying siblings, right? And she had no siblings. Okay. All right, so Rahu's in the 1st. This is something that is, you know, eerie as well too. So one of my first Vedic astrology teachers would talk to us about the issues that can come about when Rahu aspects the 5th house. And we see Rahu is in the 1st, right? So Rahu's here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's also with Neptune, which is an outer planet. Neptune is illusions, weird things, strange. Rahu's aspecting the 5th. All right. Jupiter is in the 9th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now Jupiter and Rahu are aspecting the 5th. So actually Jupiter and Rahu both aspecting the 5th can give a lot of issues with children. So we've actually seen this in the chart of JFK, okay, where he had obviously issues with the children, and he had a Jupiter-Rahu aspect onto the 5th house, okay? So 5th house is the house of children. Rahu is bringing issues, and it's not a great energy onto the 5th house. And then Jupiter's expanding that, all right? And then we're also getting Saturn's aspect onto the 5th. So Saturn's in the 3rd, 1, 2, 3. Saturn is very malefic. It's going on to the 5th house. Now we get Rahu, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, conjunct Neptune, illusions, deception. Rahu's influence on the 5th, Saturn's influence on the 5th. That's pretty malefic influence in itself to get Rahu and Saturn onto the 5th. All right. And then we're also getting Jupiter, which Jupiter and Rahu aspecting the 5th is a famous energy onto the 5th house of children that can cause loss of children. Okay. Now, Barbara Hutton, her only son, did end up tragically passing away. All right, so that's, first of all, that's a lot of that malefic 8th house influence, which is death and loss, and, you know, it's not positive, right? It's not positive, and then those malefics go on to the 2nd house of family life as well, too. She had a lot of issues with her family life, but now we're getting Rahu onto the 5th, Saturn onto the 5th, Jupiter onto the 5th, with Neptune, which Neptune can be something strange, something illusionary, something confusing. So that's that energy of a lot of malefic influence onto her children as well, too. All right, so that was the loss of her son, unfortunately. Jupiter, Rahu, in, again, JFK's chart where it aspected the 5th house. So it's just an energy that you'll see. Doesn't mean it's always going to happen, of course not, but if a chart and it's already happened, we can go back and at times see that Jupiter and Rahu aspect onto the 5th. And then also Saturn's coming in there as well too, which is not bringing any sort of positive energy onto that 5th house of children. All right. And then the 5th house lord, which is the moon, is actually hit by that Mars, right? And then Mars is aspecting its own sign that likes to be in of Capricorn. So that's a strong Mars influence onto the 5th lord. Mars would be accidents. Mars would be issues onto that 5th lord. So we have issues with this 5th house, best believe it. All right. And unfortunately, she did lose her child, right? That's that 5th house of children. Okay. So now let us look at the loss as well of the mother, right? So she lost her mother very early on. That's that Mars influence onto the moon, the mother, 1, 2, 3, 4. But then we also get Ketu's influence onto the moon. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we get Mars, malefic, onto the moon. Ketu, disconnection and loss onto the moon of the mother as well too. All right. And then we also get this Neptunian influence, which is, again, something confusing, illusionary, onto the moon, which is the mother as well. All right. So there's also losses there, especially with Ketu onto the moon. Ketu is loss. Mars is, you know, that malefic influence onto the moon as well too. But also the moon is Manas, so moon is the mind, right? So if we get malefic influence, Ketu onto the moon, Mars onto the moon, someone can have a lot of issues within their mental well-being, right? Which she did have. She struggled a lot in her lifetime with that energy of Ketu, and then Mars onto the psyche, onto Manas, onto the mind, right? So that's really, really intense. You know, it gives like this psychic ability. Mars sun in the 8th house, she was definitely mystically inclined. She was very intuitive, Ketu on the moon. However, it does cause these psychological issues as well, too, with all that 8th house. Then we get Ketu on the moon, disconnection from the mother, Mars hitting the moon, emotional aggression, and this emotional dis-ease, I would say, right? Like there's not this ease about it with all that energy on the moon or Manas as well, too. Okay. So, all right. So Barbara Hutton... Okay, this is interesting. So I didn't know this before doing the chart analysis, but I was like, you know, on a positive note, I know this is kind of like a heavy astrological reading, but I just want to show you guys like how accurate Vedic astrology is to someone's life story, good or bad, right? But when I was looking at her chart, I was like, okay, we have Jupiter in the 9th. That's a classic philosophical, metaphysical placement. She loves travel. She loves spirituality. She loves higher wisdom, higher knowledge. Then we get Sun conjunct Mars in the 8th house. So she has a love for all things 8th house, which is astrology, which is metaphysics. Then we get Ketu, which is, you know, that moksha, metaphysical energy onto the moon of the mind and Manas. So I was like, she had to have been a mystic, which is really confusing, right? Because she was like this heiress and she had all this money. And I really didn't think I was going to find validation in that online, but I was like, I also know astrology never lies, right? So I look it up and I'm like, okay, Barbara Hutton, mystical. This is what my Google search bar says right now. Lord knows when people pull up my Google, they're going to see some interesting Google searches. Okay, so Barbara Hutton, the heiress, was known for her lavish lifestyle, 7 marriages, Ketu on the 7th, Rahu in the 1st house, lavish lifestyle, Jupiter expanding Rahu in the 1st, 7 marriages, Ketu in the 7th, best believe it. She had a troubled private life, okay, a troubled private life, Sun, Mars, opposite their own signs in the 8th house of tumultuous energy, ups and downs, best believe it. Ketu's influence on the moon. Mars influence on the moon, troubled emotions, troubled emotional nature, 2 malefics in the 8th house. Troubled early childhood experiences, that malefic influence is on the 2nd of early childhood experiences, addictions, etc. Okay. Yes, we've already unraveled a lot of that. However, it now says that she had a fascination with the mystical, including a belief in reincarnation and astrology. Okay. So, she was drawn to the mystical as well, too. Now, isn't that interesting with all that energy active in the 8th house of the mystical, of metaphysical, of death, what's going on in the other worlds, and then Ketu's influence onto the moon, a very mystical energy when they come together, all right? Jupiter in the 9th as well, too, all right? So we see this energy where, yes, she had all the 8th house themes. Okay, the 8th house covers this list of themes. The first one is inheritance and other people's money. She gained a huge inheritance, had other people's money. Okay, the next meaning of the 8th house is the occult, the metaphysical, and astrology, and life after death. All right. She believed in the occult, she loved astrology, and she believed in reincarnation. That's the 8th house. The next meaning of the 8th house is tumultuous ups and downs, extremes, right? The 8th house is this energy where it's not just subtle, it's really high highs, really low lows. It's very extreme, all right? And her life was very extreme, all right? Married 7 times. Marriages were often short-lived and tumultuous. She searched for happiness that eluded her. That's the 8th house. All right. So we get both energies. All right. So it's really, really powerful to know the meanings, all the meanings of the houses. Because we have Sun in detriment opposite its own sign of Aries, there's going to be issues with this 8th house. Best believe it. Mars doesn't like to be in Libra. The Sun doesn't like to be in Libra. 2 malefics in the 8th. All right, and she did have many issues with her inheritance, where she got it, but she wasn't happy with it. All right, so now another really cool aspect of this, because we can go into the Vargas, right? We can go into the D9 of Amsha because we have AA level accuracy of her birth time. Her 2nd lord is in the 8th house in the D1, which is money from inheritance. D9 of Amsha, her 2nd lord is in the 8th house, which is money from inheritance. Okay, we see it twice, D1 and the D9. All right, then in the D9 of Amsha, we get Saturn retrograde in the 7th. 6th house lord in the 7th, which would show issues with marriage. Saturn gives issues to marriage. Ketu in the 7th gives issues to marriage in the D1. D9 of Amsha, 7th lord is in the 6th house. 6th house, I've seen many, many charts where the 7th lord in the 6th gives divorce. Okay, because the 6th house is the legal system, the 6th house is a Dastana house, the 6th house is a negative house. So we get 7th lord in the 6th, which shows loss of an early marriage as well, too. All right. And then I also just realized, this is interesting, 6th lord in the 7th, 7th lord in the 6th. We get a Parivartana yoga in the D9 of Amsha. I've been seeing this a lot lately where I'm starting to look at Parivartana yogas in the Vargas charts. So not just the D1, but I'm also looking at Parivartana yogas in like the D9 and the D10. And wow, they're like powerful and they're really working. Okay, so the D9 of Amsha is the spouse chart, right? 7th lord in the 6th loss of a spouse, loss of marriage. Sixth Lord is back in the seventh. Parivartan Yoga is strengthening that energy. So it really heightens that energy of divorce and loss of initial marriage. So sixth Lord in the seventh Lord in the sixth. All right, and then Ketu in the seventh in the D1. Now we also get Venus in the 8th house in the D9 of Amsha, which Venus is money, finances. Oh my gosh. I just can't. I can't even deal with astrology sometimes. It's too eerily accurate. So, okay, I didn't even see this before, but now we're looking at the D9 of Amsha. And now her 8th house lord is also in the 9th house in the D9 of Amsha. Like, you have to be joking. So, inheritance from the father is seen in the D1. Inheritance from the father is seen in the D9. 8th lord in the 9th house. Inheritance from the father. 8th lord of inheritance in the 9th house of the father. Venus, the Karaka for money, is in the 8th house of inheritance. All right. My goodness. My lord. All right. So we see the inheritance from the father in the D1, validated in the D9 of Amsha, validated about 5 or 6 times in multiple aspects of the chart. Second house lord in the 8th house in the D1, the D9, money from inheritance, but also early childhood issues. Jupiter in the 9th, a love for the philosophical, a love for travel. Jupiter is with Mercury, the Karaka, for travel as well, too, in the 9th house. Sun, Mars causing issues, but also, a lot of energy active in the 8th house. She was very much into all things metaphysical, occult. She believed in reincarnation. She believed in astrology. Mars onto the moon can make the emotions very aggravated, very intense. Ketu onto the moon, psychic, intuitive, but also can detach at times from the mother, which the mother did pass away when she was very young. Rahu on the ascendant, an ability to be seen, an ability to be in the public. Jupiter aspecting Rahu in the ascendant. Also, Jupiter is aspecting its own sign of Pisces on the ascendant. So I just realized that. Jupiter's in the 9th house. Jupiter's aspecting Pisces, where it loves to be, in the 1st house. So this is also a powerful chart for being seen, being in the public, being sort of like this influential figure, which she absolutely was. Rahu on the ascendant is aspecting the 5th house. Jupiter in the 9th is aspecting the 5th. Saturn is aspecting the 5th, giving issues with the children, right? Saturn retrograde in the 3rd, denied siblings. She didn't have any siblings. Also, Venus, the great benefic in the 10th house. Her career was essentially based on Venus. She was beautiful. She, was like a socialite and heiress. She was just seen for her like beauty and her looks and her money and her wealth, right? Venus in the 10th house lord in the 9th house connects to travel, connects to the father, all right, which it did, quite literally. Jupiter, Mercury in the 9th, she had a love for learning, philosophical, spiritual pursuits and spiritual topics. She was very philosophical with that Jupiter in the 9th house conjunct Mercury. She was also very much into, going to events that were like giving back, and that's that classic like socialite heiress sort of energy, Jupiter in the 9th house. She loved to travel, Jupiter in the 9th house. All right. And I also really want to emphasize the point that she embodied all the energy and all the meanings of the 8th house. Best believe it. All of them. Her life was the 8th house. Riches from other people, ups and downs, tumultuous energy, psychological issues, addictions, loss of marriage. 7th lord in the 6th, 6th lord in the 7th in the D9 of Amsha, Parivartan Yoga, divorce. All right. Whew. You guys, as a professional astrologer, to this day, and my entire life, because I'll be studying this forever, right? Like Vedic astrology is a lifelong study, but to this day, it still gives me chills. It still gives me this feeling of, wow, astrology is so, so powerful. This is her whole entire life story that we just unraveled in 30 minutes through Vedic astrology. How powerful, it doesn't get much more powerful than that. All right. And I'm sure that Barbara Hutton went to astrologers back in the day. She has that strong 8th house. It said she believed in reincarnation and astrology. I wonder if she ever got a Vedic astrology reading. That'd be interesting. Let's see if we can find that online. Let's see. Because Lord knows they would have told her this whole life story. Let's see, ever get a Vedic astrology reading. Let's see if there's any information. Nothing comes up, but also this is kind of funny. It says she was known for her extravagant spending habits. Sun, Mars onto the 8th house. It's extreme energy. All this energy goes towards it. It's onto the 2nd house of money. Rahu on the Ascendant can be so extreme in its energy. Best believe it. All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed this really in-depth and eerily accurate Vedic chart analysis of Barbara Hutton, who is called Poor Little Rich Girl. And the reason I just thought it was so interesting is because she embodied every single theme of the 8th house, the ups and the downs and the addictions and the, you know, rocky life story and the interest in astrology and the metaphysics, but also, you know, the inheritance. And it was just so 8th house. And I was like, wow, she has that Sun conjunct Mars in the 8th house of Libra, which is going to give, you know, benefic and malefic results. All right. Also, this is very specific, but when someone has benefics in their 9th house, 9th house is the house of, like, you know, guru, guide, wisdom. So usually benefics in the 9th house will give an energy where someone can have, you know, good past life karma with like guides and gurus. And so a lot of times you'll find that those with, you know, benefics in their 9th house, they do well when they go and try to seek spiritual, philosophical wisdom. So if someone goes to an astrologer and they have benefics in the 9th house versus malefics in the 9th house, it's a very different experience. And I've seen this in my clients. I always remember James Braha, one of my Vedic teachers, would tell us, like, those who have really afflicted bad 9th houses, they'll come to you and they'll be those clients where the astrological knowledge doesn't flow towards them. They don't really get it. It causes issues, right? But these benefics in the 9th house, Jupiter, the great benefic, with Mercury, another benefic, yes, the 9th lord is having some issues with the Sun and Mars, but these two great benefics, Jupiter's guru, guide, wisdom, knowledge, it's in the 9th house where it naturally likes to go. Her astrological chart is like flowing. It is open for us to read, right? So that's that Jupiter influence onto the 9th. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think about all of this down below. I hope this wasn't too like high level, complex Vedic astrology. I know it gets really complicated, but I hopefully, you know, can analyze these charts in a way that's still easy for you guys to follow along and understand and learn from, because Vedic astrology is just so powerful and it's so accurate. And we're going to see someone's entire life story through the Vedic astrological chart. All right, I'm sending all the best vibes. I'm sending all the love. I hope you guys have such a good day. Comment, like, and subscribe for more content coming soon. And we'll talk soon. Bye, guys.